Good morning, everyone. Roll call mine.
Palaszczuk, Ms. Bennington, Ms. Bernal Leon, here, Ms. Blanchard, Ms. Brown, here, Ms. Burks,
Present.
Mr. Christ, Mr. Cooley, Dr. Day, Dr. Flellen, Mr. Glitzer, Ms. Hammer Levy, Dr. Hirschhorn, Mr. Brown for Mr. Williamson, Ms. Kroll, Mr. Miller, Dr. Moyer, Ms. Powers, Mr. Pratt, Mr. Schwartz for Mr. Freeman, Mr. Provenzano, Ms. Hunt. Chair, we have
There are no changes to the agenda. So we'll go on to item 2, that's from. Are there any discussion on that or changes? It's Friday. Spot back there. All right, hearing none, the motion to accept the minutes. Motion and second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I do not see any members of the public here in person, but is there anyone online who would like to speak? Hearing none, I'll into our action items, the quarterly financial report and final fiscal year 25 program wide budget.
Okay, so now you're back. All from big item. Meetings, this quarterly report will actually serve as our final budget adoption goal. We're in the process of logging for years. Just a couple of items highlighted as part of this budget. Overall for the year, it's about 3.5 million with revenues, which is a bit higher than expected. Good thing. Most part, it's all looking more in terms of contract and primarily contracted for grants that UP saw the water expecting. Well, the nature of the intended. It's all a bit more in terms of applications and donations to the program we're expecting. So yeah, pretty good news in terms of total revenues. One thing I did want to note, specialty license plate sales did a little bit bigger than under 10,000 bigger than budgeted, basically a 5-year running average. So it's a little bit lower sales. Asked if there's some kind of continue to get the message out for community-based work from you. On the expense side, include a couple of things. In total, we're at about 3.3 million expenses, a bit lower than expected. Again, that's mostly due to timing of projects when there's a need. Those projects that we didn't realize some completion for significant projects. Tasks prior to this year, a lot of that work was just rolling. You see a contract service for that 1.6 million. The expectation comes to 20. If you have a couple of footnotes on there, we're a little bit over in terms of direct personal expenses, travel, conferences. On the personnel side, we actually had a staff relief in September, so we had a over just prior years. We actually had to put on our pumps as per audit. A little bit higher than what I expected at the year, but overall very close to the number projected. On the travel and conference decided, we went over slightly the request participated conference state for in the South, participated as share our science these were invited travel that were programmed for different budget, some of them offsets to everything. Yeah, a little bit higher on those two line items, but for the most part, we're just about at the budget for your items. The other footnote just mentioned our in-kind expenses. We actually recognize in-time for both our fiscal and planning, 2035 planning. Expected that, but that's also a good thing. City thank you for providing that documentation for the county for the in-time projects that do first that match others. Overall, like I said, this will become the basis for our audit that's currently taking place, and we'll bring back result answer. Any questions? Excellent.
There was some,
Yeah, we've been for spreading lightly in terms of any legislative requests or changes that are about to be legislature. Like, if that's an interest of towards state legislative cycle, they are strategy and but step or tax question of get the word out. Over Brian that first. The overall revenues from the license plate have been varying around that $105,000. Didn't see this dip this past year, but yeah. Encourage everyone to get license plate as well. But if that's an interest of that. I don't think we could get the actual who buys it from the DMV. I think we could buy that, but it's something I could. Officer program experience. Actually, if he saw a license plate in a parking lot like Publix, yeah, it's hard. It's windshield consistent. But when they're not people like that, it might have. That
Favor? Any opposed?
then I have nothing bringing in the November meetings. For sort of priorities that we've been developing partnership together the national state also pitched to association ownership. A lot of these are things that that these are our opportunities to kind of speak with locally like state officials, federal delegation. So the priorities we like to see that for state next legislative slate. The three big ones that we're partnered on, but the state delegation continue to work on some of our bridges and colleagues, opportunities to enhance that circulation. Design for some that their improvement. We actually met the Florida Department of Transportation we're trying to meet them again in December on this issue, as well as sort of carry over from the August boards invitation benefit from their first. I'll probably have a better update for you in February. We had the second meeting. The bar has been having open lines of communication with the clinicians. Some headway position. Participate on either a funding partner or a bank. Likewise, a lot of the focus, as you all know, has been in Ocampo Bay, so looking for opportunity for financial benefits history, as well as other issues facing watershed. So, Ocampo Bay water management district, different opportunities to like Lake Charles or potential public waters. Stormwater things, it's a there is nutrient nodes, so those co-benefit project opportunities to develop things benefit not only the environment, but there's the supply. So brings elevate the the last sort of big issues that we've been continuing for recycling urban network. That started to string together some green funding stations in Tampa Bay, actually seeking some state funding for establishment of a new climate monitoring station in Bishop Harbor. They're getting close to even basically running out of funds to the station long term. So needs support that brings other level of understanding or quality than something that's how you can broken into the same basis. Real time station kind of fill in the needed time period of the county park profit. Those are the three big local ones. Also want to continue to express support for the initiatives that you all are doing. Effective governance, wastewater, stormwater infrastructure, finding liberty to get a lot of accomplished. There are other sort of priorities that, like that, should programs have very important state and delegation. This is sort of the opportunity to kind of discuss this. One last thing before I turn it over to that discussion. The federal side, you see the federal government's this week. Other positive news on that front is we've had a reauthorization bill for the national street programs. Really good news for the national street programs. This Congress, this administration, and system bipartisan support. Hoping that we'll actually see a vote on that reauthorization bill in this Congress, and what that allows Congress to do is that for justification to actually appropriate funds to authorize programs. We're like a key step in terms of creating more legitimacy for appropriations. And then last but not least on the federal side, we'll also again work with county partners. Federal partners to fully utilize wild and scenic river designation of the Kentucky River and stalled out during the shutdown. Again, needs to be a study completed and put back on that. Designation. If things would be benefit or finding dollars and a lot of skin identified. The periphery. So those are for the priorities that we've outlined as staff, so period for our clear impact. Especially for our history program, you all communicate with the state.
And on the following, or the waste number. Is there already discussion of that in terms of funding or the regulations? Then say goodbye, for example, so it's like for those very college and also one line is legislature looking at mandatory and manual inspections of things which Steve will disappear. Dash.
Yeah, those are good points. And in terms of like our education of elected officials, we have some projects, district road. Something. Part of. So that final year, I get a improved EPA projects that are targeted. We want to communicate that it will get that then, but septic tank inspection. It started to be discussed a lot more because legislative changes for the CBO in that areas and septic system with those designated areas throughout the state. It's a hot topic that especially for level rates. So they're over top. Yeah.
I just like the mouse spot, it's not different. It's fun. See what's good. This goes. We'll take a page and professional.
Here's 7.
We did investigates structure place. To stuff like that. Hopes that we can get that. Yeah, she works. That. For the one out. Actually. It's actually the rush station. Safety station, but they're nothing. Beside of the So we're looking to add more of them. They're very popular. Company very responsive. The great staff working in so great here. Their system is ours. Have both from natural for our systems. The two real time 12 as they focus and working on and residents. So it's getting us for the on board It's very often. We are looking at another, one of our patients. Understanding that, you know, there are some changes. So, that location, station just to. One of those stations. We can slide. Over. The rest of it stuff. So.
Here's what you
You're interested. Sure.
It just feels like taking stations. I'm going on for. You can go on here. For some areas. You can put some line on here. Also Spanish language. Also, that from there, been working through with Silver Jackets for initiative for and it's initiative working with the state. Wake up, celebrating the night brought up your guys' station. You're leading sort of a statewide effort and there's communicating water quality conditions after snapping events, hurricanes, or the state. There might be opportunities there, so that your staff is involved with for having or so now. Again, it's sort of get out understanding and speed of the apps and anything further on the level that for as employed. That's just communicate for these vulnerabilities and risks after start this perfect as we do. Like a bouncing to perfect. Again, another thing to plug into, we can send out some more information. Maybe another option, kind of better for some of this.
Brendan, all people were approved the fiscal year 26, Florida Extroverts Alliance. And they have heard from some priorities. I did. I'm sorry, can you make the question? Big. Second. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. 2026 May, right now.
Do you just want to ask the room if you can project your voices? You're all speaking pretty quietly and like so struggling with having heard.
Sorry, Felicia. Well.
Good morning. All right, so this is the program. It's right here. So what we do with the revenue program. December and opened our then a whole bunch of our lovely station members, volunteers reviewed the applications. We found finding the recommendations and we had a record number of applications this year, which was full. We did a lot of additional outreach, one-on-one and so we also had additional webinars, and we have for longer so that contributed to the word out more. So I'm really happy to see that all So before you today are funded, we have 7 projects on that list. Total, $130,000. So that is just over, just a bit over the budget. So. Did you get?
Changes to the, grading rubric prompted more smaller, applicants, instead of the more, those bigger folks that apply every year.
I'm not sure, we definitely had a lot of new applicants, I'm not sure about that rest of the smaller. But it was good to see a lot of fresh faces this time. Honestly, it's great to have returning applicants, but yeah, there's a few that responded to funding priority of art, environmental education, environmental science education, art. So it was nice to see, I don't know if they were responding to that specifically or not sure, but yeah. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, it's good, just good saying, if you're dipping a little bit into reserves, the on more projects this year, this based on. A reserve fund for the list, but it's a very robust, yeah, over $500,000 groups. Great sales, so trying to get that money out the door to projects throughout the Thursdays, that was also sort of intention. Try to find your projects, your part of projects, so get a full basket of. Your job just to get the word out. But hopefully fun and developing partnerships. So.
Recommend policy board approve funding of Medicaid grants based on findings of the community advisory committee and the effective for. Motion, so. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Executive director and staff.
You had those NG phase, it's still be working on something like that. Early science communications for the. Probably doing the program in September is with the that English. That's the. Had a fairly aggressive advertisement for that position. So it's been with us now, but. I'll be looking for her. It's only by way of record. Require. Quickly national party, that's. Have to have for board. Partner into the fire. Also wanted to mention that I kind of talked about this during. Let's say priority updates, but in follow to the joint August match, also working. For the strategic plan and interlocal agreement updates this next year, we have reached out to learn from the transportation as I mentioned, to see if they. Management also with a partner. The official request of that meeting, follow up with her, so waiting around responsible. Actually, that can set talk about this topic as well as. The other conversation that came out of that workshop is also potentially extending an invitation to the city of Largo. That's really good conversations with the city. Past quarter, they're very much interested in joining as a funding partner for the program. We're actually going to be discussing and some December 2nd, actually, council meeting. if, like I said, have expressed interest and say, only we council, then move through the process, adding them and considering adding them as funding part or funding every board meeting for that. That would require unanimous. They basically would be supplementing in terms of how money breaks out to the population that has covered in each town's county's populations that are over here, taking some of that. And participate. Do for quarterly meetings was direct funding as part of it. So, yeah, the process for adding new members. Takes unanimous approval from the process. Probably the top schedule all as well. And it's every. Was wrong with mine. I'm going to turn it over to staff and a couple of updates on the business and some priority.
Volunteer events with free. Mainly we had several events that were. So, trash cleanups, one of the ones that I'm proud of, happened in September. Ventures to do a tri-county Egmont cleanup. So we had over 250 volunteers signed up. We had 177 volunteers actually show up. We had 3 private ferries that took residents and volunteers from the mainland in Dallas County and in Palmetto and Bradenton out to the island. And we removed over 2,000 pounds of trash, just about 4 hours. So that was pretty impressive. It was really exciting. Fun stuff like
There's more of those trash cans.
Yes, trash cans from City of St. Peter. Like the some of the virtual infrastructure from the is brought even brought here. And it's on the island, so a ton of stuff. It was a really awesome event. That great public-private partnership that's so well in the bay. We have another large free event coming up. It's our annual Timothy Derby. This is happening December 6th. I think it's in park in Ruskin. So for those of you who are familiar with it, it's in the trash collection coming. So you work yourself or in teams, collect as much trash as possible and have an opportunity to some really awesome prizes like the sunglasses and powerful or that. We have over $20,000 in prizes, so so please get with your teams, sign up, off of it.
So, my granddaughter was out there. Doing this trash.
Yay!
Her hair's going on. So, but good job. That was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I took a lot of back-end logistics planning to have so many people and so many ferries out on a small island. So
I think on the whole thing.
Yeah, just want to keep you all apprised of how things are. Remember, time meetings, workshop meetings, or management board meetings. And for some time, working with the whole management conference, figure out how to get Tampa Bay back in the successful trajectory. And so part of that was done in capacity assessment, which there are a number of different recommendations that were supported by the evidence assembled through that project. And our goal is not really to just let them project sit as a series of peer reports in our the library, but we are recommendations to so that we can have that again translate to a successful restoration trajectory. What we presented to you on some of the recommendations that are salient to the Nitrogen Management Consortium, which relate to how we participate in a regulatory process related to nitrogen loading and the resultant chlorophyll conditions. There were also a number of recommendations that are really more appropriate, not for the Management Consortium, but for the TAC to consider if the TAC feels it's appropriate to advance those recommendations to you all to consider whether or not you'd like to advance those to the policy board. So we've begun several of those conversations with the Habitat Restoration Consortium and with the TAC. One of the recommendations that we've been discussing is rather than focusing just on absolute loading, also looking at different scales of chlorophyll A production in full country. So we talked about potentially advancing subsegment, and seasonal chlorophyll A targets that hopefully would be able to give you closer to real-time information that translates to different ways that you can manage your stormwater systems, your wastewater treatment facilities, your flood control structures, but potentially be able to intervene, not so that you could necessarily produce a reduction in chlorophyll that season, but so that you can help to sort of not have two back-to-back. That's sort of the rationale, and we're trying to produce tools that would help you achieve those kinds of things. But we're working that the TAC process right now. Sort of it's a really kind of different way of thinking about how to make A not on that time basis for a 5-year time step, but again, like over a couple of months, and then how that might relate to actions that you all pursue. So I think the TAC is still considering whether or not that's something that's useful that they would like to advance forward. But I did want to put that on the radar if that's something that might be coming for you all here at the management board level. And then the other recommendation that both the HRC and the TAC would be considering relates to oyster restoration. And right now, for the Habitat Master Plan, we have a bay-wide goal of trying to restore a certain number of acres of oysters. And this recommendation is really looking at should we have a goal that is maybe applicable to the Old Tampa Bay segment in particular. And so the HRC has sort of evaluated different ways that we might accomplish that bay segment specific oyster restoration goal. The TAC members provided some feedback on what the HRC had proposed to them. Again, it's not in a place where it's actually making its way to you as a recommendation, but we want to sort of know that these things are going on, and they may be coming to you as recommendations. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
So with Old Tampa Bay specifically and Senate Bill 64, it's that are going to occur in the future. Is there discussion at the TAC level about the timing of where those entities are, or they must be based on we're going to have before 2030? And so is that happening at the TAC level?
No, most of those conversations are happening at the nitrogen management consortium level. And so not only have we had those conversations there, but that is also a component of the task force report that came out of the assimilative capacity assessment. On the whole, it does not look like most of these types of improvements will be in place prior to the deadline for 2032. There may be one or two exceptions to that. And then whether or not that gets us sort of where we need to be for that base segment overall, we think that the task force report suggested that will get us some of the way, but not all of the way. To where Old Tampa Bay needs to be. So we haven't had those conversations at the TAC as much. This conversation has been more at the mission.
Is there, and that makes sense, but is there an opportunity to provide support to allow those to happen? And I know, and I'm talking about it because specifically in Sarasota Bay, that is be focused on wastewater overflows and things that are happening
great recovery. And the theory is that it's because of the DIN being more available. And so if you attack that first, that's gonna give you the best thing. But, and so maybe that's in consideration in this area as well too.
Yeah, those were specifically considerations that were incorporated into the Old Tampa Bay capacity assessment, and we have sort of advanced some of these projects to accelerate them if we can. For example, with the IIJA funding, we are going to help get their UIC well on track faster than they would have without that example. A lot of these things are sort of, we could provide some support to accelerate those, and those would be like very projects, for example. But again, understanding that the scale of some of these wastewater treatment projects, many of them are going to far exceed our capacity to provide financial support. We can certainly provide some. We can also, as we've sort of talked about in the legislative updates and priorities, make sure that those requests, the importance and value that this provides in the whole Tampa Bay segment in particular. We can make sure that elected officials are aware of that. But I also just sort of caution that we understand that was an important part of the recipe for success in Sarasota Bay. But what the Old Tampa Bay study has sort of shown us is that multi-IN might be an important component, and it might have an outsized impact on the amount of primary productivity in Clearfield A and Old Tampa Bay. That it's in a slightly different kind of situation, and that it's not the only sources that are going in there. And we look at the overall makeup, we still feel that the evidence suggests that there is value in pursuing this sort of multi-pronged approach, where you are also looking at reducing the inputs from stormwater sources and public.
We'll need to go on a night to that.
So I do think that we think that's something that's a little bit different about our system, that we want to sort of, we don't want to suggest that just take care of water and the system will fix itself. We think it's going to be water.
Yeah, and that's true in terms of. That was just. But it's still one.
Yes.
For that.
Do you think that the tech would have valuable input to sort of complement what the nitrogen management consortium discussions are?
I think it could be helpful. I look at use. I know you're heavily involved with that, but I think that discussions might be to understand the timing of it, because I also think that's if we're trying to make improvements today, that some of these efforts about an curve, and I'm sorry, I don't know, is it that they have to be in place by 2030? There has to be a plan in place. Is there a difference?
So the plan was already due. So those plans have been due to the department. I don't think they all get to they are supposed to be. And Brandon, if you're capable of giving an update, I don't think that there's like a regulatory camera on that. It's not the sense that I've gotten, because many of these utilities have not sort of been doing the capital planning that's necessary to get all of this in place. So I'm not sure what kind of grace will be on, but I will say that the Old Tampa Bay working group of the nitrogen management consortium has at the same time been sort of working to consider the decision memos and the feedback that we've received from the department and from the EA on this idea of a sort of additional compliance assessment process that is looking at the absolute load that's going into Old Tampa Bay. And I guess candidly, I would share with you the feedback from that group. It seems to be that all of the actions prior, and so that's something that we're sort of working with that group, just because folks are tight, folks are trying to figure out like how they can catalyze and invest in the necessary actions. And so I think that question of timing is one that is really important and still being worked through even at the consortium level.
Would still be for somebody that's the for weather discharge still. But it's not a complete location. mindset that's only gonna get us partway there. There are areas that we can. Try to achieve offers, have a 90% target reduction. That case, so that's gonna take more than just week for their. We mentioned it before, in other sort of co-benefiting projects like in anti-station, getting that water to move out of that system more effectively. All these things are trying to put on. As much as we can support, see the funding that we have, trying to do that. Gonna take a village, probably get all the same.
And I think that her discussions with me, that we see. The here.
Yeah, maybe percent, like I said, these latest conversations, I think they're starting to see the light. We talk about the benefits. Community. But if you will, that ranks when participating, beneficial products. So, got it.
That's my other question.
Our next, activity.
Yes.
Going, this campus, but, here, that's a couple of teams. So maybe there's something in between there that kind of. It's your vote.
You have one more update. Just get on, paper.
The organization fund. Will open January 6th, March, that is very soon. These three are potential funding priorities, so y'all are key experts. I would love to know where you think about these priorities, if these are good to move forward and to fall, any input that we have on these three. One, is assess effectiveness, functionality, effects of mitigation and restoration projects. That comes from our research pipeline. The other is protecting the habitats, the acquisition and restoration, to help meet the 2020 targets, and the housing cluster plan, and some of the priorities for this, they're based on 5% farm, which is still in that. And the last is implement best practices for stormwater runoff reduction and stormwater and environments. So, what are your thoughts?
Megan's already off the books.
Yeah.
Or was it comment?
Me, so I. Are you?
No, okay. Reduction was on our.
Yeah, I mean, certainly seeing projects that have started there. That have. It's out there for people. It's
It seems like the general demand for figure funding is largely to support national information. Prioritize that, but again, this is an opportunity for you all to use our grant programs strategically if there's things that you really think are critical. This is a place where this helps us in the scoring criteria, as you know.
make certain projects more competitive, so. We welcome any changes or learning different kinds of priorities. There's work that we think is needed in large.
It's just, hard. You want to mention one last thing, had several staff this week, participated in. I just came back. Which is next to a big program. Last night, we have a very big lake up there. Marcus Tech, the bit at, close to the park. Sure.
Do the first, so, yeah, I just, able to. On the best piece of seven. I think that the request to MWC was in response to one of the TAC members' concerns about a stretch of the Graydon River. And, I think that the FWC's approach was to contextualize those results in the Graydon River with other rivers and sort of put the results of the long-term monitoring show those. I think basically after reviewing those data, the TAC sort of agreed with FWC's assessment that things looked, reasonable in the Graydon River and that the concerns did not merit any action, at least from the TAC, in terms of like additional study regarding the anecdotal observations about. Comfortable, we can support them and feeling, we'll try and create an environment where it's safe to offer thoughts, but that's sort of what makes for a productive tap, because if you don't understand something, you can ask the question. Have an observation, you can share it with TAG, we can tap into additional resources to see what data is there to answer those questions or move forward, but we are trying, I think, really hard. Marcus and Gary are working to make the meetings more engaging, to really sort of build up the expertise of the region. We'll always provide service of trying to inform people, but we would also like to be receiving information and insights from you all and your staff on the ground. So, since which you can make sure that they know it's good to ask questions and talk. Had some great meetings. It was a good time to photos of the awesome event at the build your own ORP. Description. Wrote, poster that bought that. Anyway, they did a good job. And we're really grateful for that. When they, the meeting, our CAC members all hours to the fairly with record number of applications. I think that really speaks to the CAC member reaching out to their networks to invite folks to apply and to know about the opportunity. We had 5 great events that Shills spoke about and as far as previously awarded Bay Mini grants, 7 were completed and 8 are he listed 6 educational components. Those.
Discussion item.
But yeah, this is a sort of opportunity to kind of discuss and provide some direction to the policy for how they work. All of that. Obviously. So I just want to quickly kind of review the timeline that we're under for all of the. We heard from that August that we see it as specific. The present final version of they that can be distributed e.g. or entities legal counsel now thanks for every working that will be prepared to move forward with a potential recall that update that will require us to sort of meet our overall deadline of September 30th. About right now, we're there in that brown box, that November timeframe. We developed some draft updates to the language of the report. Made divergence of recommendations in terms of how to fund the program, contributions from partners, and as I mentioned, that we can explore some direction at this November meeting to. Along with the draft number that will give us some time to get it full file and about all the local partner for that number 30. So there is a link to sort of these draft updates that have been made. Or staff recommendations that updates the actual narrative language in the interlocal brief document. There's not even 3 main ones that are highlighted here. First bullet point is just recognizing some of the work that has been accomplished since the last interlocal briefing development. Not recognize that both the 2022 performance update and also there are various references through the document. These discovered in stock, so updating the text. Then, Jim Twain, our legal counsel, also cleaned up one of the funding and key definitions. Reference to local government with my identified with A for one partner definition. Section 3R. And then the last update recommendation is based on the current fund level, just did sort of the contribution offsets that could occur and it means cheaper contributions to the program, what those levels might be, or it could fall out for the schedule funding. So those are sort of the minor updates that we made to the actual text. But following up from the management policy board discussions, there's more thing that we usually discuss in this update sound on the program. Where a lot of those discussions center around the programs based on a formula. Regards the population for everything. Each of the city and county governments for within the stream. As coming part of the program is a little one. The two sort of. I think the divergent views that we heard at the workshop is pressure not to consider the being static at our current fiscal year 26 funding levels for the next 5 years is one option that the board can consider. It's not our preferred option staff. It's not advocating for, but we know and realize the pressure of what's coming. A lot of great programs. That's sort of one option that could occur through this on that. The other option would be just advancing the traditional funding formula that we developed in the region based on that population difficulty that or current population estimates. So we have a sort of option B that represents that. Then there was some discussion about potential boundary expansion if we were to move into St. Joseph Sound, over our harbor, of course, Clinton River, but that the overall operations program. So I have developed a number of things around that, but I did not hear consensus from our board and that shop that happened. They would want to pursue that during this update. So open discussion, but there would have to be unity for us to kind of move that direction. I hear that at the last week. So really what I'm presenting to you guys as our funding recommendation moving forward based on that team. Basically keeping things static over the next 5 years versus we often be doing the funding adjustments that's we've traditionally done to just the funding paper. They're local based on population. There's sort of a generic figure up there that kind of shows what that represents. Means if we go option A, basically our static contributions from local customers to static in the next 5 years. Whatever federal appropriations we want to see, we match towards those federal dollars and kind of project. But the alternative is to consider for this 2.5% increase each year that takes into account inflationary factors and readjust the contribution to each department based on updates the population. But there's the most current population estimate we have of 2023. And within the board package, you get linked to that full document as well as sort of those coming up and see how they play out for each year. There's actually, based on a lot of the changes that we've experienced from the last interlocal agreement, based on 2018 for population that's versus there's been a lot of changes in watershed, and it just feeds in the funding shifts from some partners to others during this update. So that's something sort of consider as we waited up, but really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that. But that all the work vendors that represent insurance fees and support of. Again, I think we can make either option work for all kind of keeping things as they have been, and that's allowed us to, I think, grow and leverage more resources that we deliver back to each of our organizations. So I want to kind of advocate for that, but I think there's also the idea that is also maintain equity within the region for the rural population. Population. So I'm going to leave it there. I could bring up the full document. Want to see the changes, bring up the funding pages. Closely as it's here. That's sort of the general overview on the recap of what happened in August. Kind of had that discussion here with the men where before we have that conversation. Yeah, for the final direction of this. Something that will stop there. Your desire for me to bring up the document itself and roll through it. You're probably gonna hope the document. Yeah, I've ran some numbers that are basically the lower penalty on this contribution. So. That, I mean, that's the point of discussion as well. That's the way I develop the tables. After being actually additive, you're past it or you're after adopted. If you adding to the overall number tolerate it. It's severe. You currently yeah, so there's an upper and lower table. Basically, the upper table is if an entity contributes either at the level of materials of the district, then there's a little bit of a discount for the overall compensation program for recognition that we're using some of those funds to offset or salary rich costs. But really, the bottom table probably should look at that's kind of a without any sort of deeper contribution. That's how the funding for breakdown. The table under A are basically this year's the funding level for this year, the yellow highlight for each thing. The program that it's just period for that no action on for the next 5 years. The second set of tables are taking into account for the changes in population, how that might affect industry. The program. Department district let us know they're wanting to maintain that contribution program in that 5 year. That we divvy up the balance based on population. I mentioned because of the change in sort of the demographics of jurisdictions. Enough for this issue, this interval. But there's cases like we do what that's them. All sort of relative to the changes that have happened. It's based on the population within the 20 park. Go through. Yeah, they the Stephen, they do participate. I think it's just knowing where there might be interest, so we knew based on conversations that we all city. Rather than another city that you can, that we that consider that we could be more interested. Lot more. Our purpose. But there are other people that that think when we sort of kind of take a look at other entities coming to the fold, it's not necessarily not. County contribution, but that's. But unless there's a different direction. Or appreciate that. We're trying to be equitable, but thoughtful. Region. Definitely appreciate the continued support of all our local partners. Like I said, it's allowed us to grow to staff that I don't think is going to grow more, but we're not going to need full-time part-time staff or trying to create value as much as we can with funding into the program. Other things. Over this past quarter, you see in the quarterly report, we're actively about 21.5 million active grant projects. Into programs. So trying to early developer, putting that out for the project. Yeah, that's it.
As one of the entities that see the growth. I think it's logical to base things population that help mental health or human, especially with the discussions around change property taxes. But I do think that that organization. And I do agree with you that it's true Congress needs.
I do want to mention, after the August meeting, I did have our opportunity to present that right now. So for ASCO now, for the some early number. That was in response to some of the comments heard of August. But it should know it's coming. Because that we see positively. Support. Know that you're sort of the same way. There's certain challenges that people are certainly want to continue to show how we're acting.
I don't know. These things. Or this. Tell me how our organizations find and pass and impact.
Yeah, so in the wake of the fact that in 2015 and all of the great, I think there was discussion at least for Kenneth Bay Water that would be sort of an annual voluntary contributions to the program. It does provide additional local funding support of our program into the funding tables. I think for the reason that there wasn't, I think confidence that might be able to be continued, but you all have been supporting the program year to year. Appreciate that. Every contribution listed up here by local partners did approval of the respective agencies. So even though it is defined in sort of these tables, it's explained to each jurisdiction on a year-to-year basis. So kind of view Kenneth Bay Water like if there's a desire to add new golf to the table this round, I think we'd be happy to do that. But we're kind of going based on sort of that have in place. That's when a lot of that was all of our support has been maintained at that level.
I think you all know this, but those parties that are listed here are ones that are represented on the policy board, this management board, this board.
Yeah, and there was, because of uncertainty and continued contributions from different, where they were interested in funding us. Be represented on that, but their desire, and they would have sit on all the board at the time. That that's expressed. An appropriate direction. To resolve with that, that's sort of, my person, Sir Holly, worked all a lot. Do that.
Things possible. Not that. I think there'd be less. On the side. My Bible, like others. So it's not, that it's not proper access. Tends to be less. Less access. It's possible. But now it's not that is and I've got check it's like the parents.
Can I ask how many of you pay your dues out of the enterprise fund and not under the forum? I expect this to be a topic of conversation at the policy board, so it's helpful for me to know. I see this. If you're not sure, if you get back to me before next Friday, should be not.
I would be curious. It's like. Just have a, some, the defense, stormwater, great, great. This past year. For fiscal year 26, I, went ahead and updated them equally. All the different fact note. Area and account.
Very just. Advocating for the funding to be able.
The question should be expressed that to the policy board on your behalf, and generally the consensus is that population, updated population with the 2.5% increases is the
That's the information we need to appreciate you guys. That we have this discussion. The bottom. That continues for. Everything you guys contribute.
Nation.
It's always, like I mentioned, there's a lot more projects in the high level that we try and report to you at, so if you wanna dive deeper into some of those individual details. You can, it launches off from this dashboard, if you ever want to walk through with you how to, sort of use that to its fullest, I'd be more than happy to. Otherwise, the next meeting is in February 13th, 9 a.m. Plan. So if there are any projects that could use some additional funding support help to let me know, and as we should be doing our preliminary budget meetings early, we can see what each program in, back to you. February and May meetings.
I just want to share, so obviously last. The bird needs and all the play we had, and, administrators, staff, and policies, and how else to identify gaps in. Regional stormwater management. Along with this, we're running the bring machines. How they are on the. Honestly, there's a lot of. Challenges in that, because a lot of the things is not under control. Those types of things, so, but we're working with GeoSyntech to basically develop that gap analysis that looks at all of our different management. We've obviously a lot of opportunity for respiration. If that was the other to this, so, those of you on Alice, brought it up at the quarterly start last week. Which we host for, the provider of the information. Show that to those people, with some other partners as well. We get based on our discussion, so, if you believe that, it's something. We do have a major project that talks about. That almost all houses. And, we are in that position stage right now. Yeah, we are honoring that. So I'll just about this process. Now that books are being really not wanting to own anymore, so they're and the team has talked about project with the finishing up how to take some of that property, or exchange it, or purchase it from the for that project. But really looking forward to, it's a major project that did a lot of. And that's the type of work that it's possibly very large systems and help. That function. They are embedded since they also.
That's used that for being working on the look at this. Be the head of. With the problem wind up with that.
We went out to the Channel 5 project for the final walk, I guess. Here has been lowered almost 2 feet. So, and there's the salinity, the range there, and then there's a whole bunch of plants along one side of the bank. So it could be a good project for a tour in the future of attention.
Yeah, so. About a month ago. We got a call about a bunch of fish skills. And the residents of the pond, they understood that, just things that. So. Unexpected, thing that occurred, we'll keep an eye on, if there's going to be a problem. So, like, all that, mentioned, license, we did bring all of alcohol. Obviously, they were. They're designed to be alcohol to protocol requirements and not the environment. Materials. Upgrade all of the alcohol, so they were compatible with the new environment, was that expect and it's a impact, so yeah, we'll keep an eye on it if it turns out that it's going to get found, try to see if that. Hopefully, it's not that it's bad. So that's going into some of the process.
So all of the really the community rates on basically that it is being from the bay, from the channel into the ponds.
So they want.
Yeah, I think.
I will say, I mean, the biggest concern we had on that was extreme fluctuation of tide, and perception of that, and that has not been an issue at all there. So that's been very positive.
Yeah, the certain extent, some of the dark areas further south. Certain areas that target stuff out right on the lot. Opportunity to benefit them for the transition.
Well, as I'm saying, it might change through time, so if those ponds stay brackish, then. Should be used for. I mean, all of it's changed long. That's interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if like we should target them for outreach for presentation for about the backwater.
Yeah, I mean, it might be good. The watershed. Stuff, at least right now, said. Presentation at their. Community association meeting, and they loved it. I love the outreach. It's not a group that typically sees that, and yet they're right there on Old Bay. Yeah. And then they very much hear about it. It's very. So it's very good meeting. They asked great questions. Obviously, they loved it. Yeah. So there was a lot of concern about that. A lot of concern about the changes to the channel and would that increase their flooding and actually show them actually because so they were very happy for that, but they're looking at it, they're very excited about their so it's very they're just not one that honestly is a lot that most farmers really focused on about that channel because it's so perception is that we're kind of now that that's how I want all the time to, you know, it's watch this it's gonna be a flooding and flood us. It hasn't been so it's been very, very positive. Very happy.
I think the project manager expressed that the main complaints were that they wish that the landscaping was on both sides. In their backyard, the one is too, and not just on the one side of the camp.
Yeah,
That's a good complaint to have.
Yeah.
Exactly what this is.
They are seeing different wild policies. I mean, we had our goals, you know, community seeing the value, even though they didn't quite trust us at the beginning, it's good to have good help for everybody. Make a request to come down with some students and they need to yell out there. So we worked on So it's kind of funny, but we showed them some before pictures. It was during cloud five, so you couldn't see the structure at all.
Yeah, we couldn't see it.
So you gotta go out. And the other thing is. Leave it off. We actually have to stay. For the bus, because it's just. That was. Was it?
I'll also report that we had a work plan funded project to restore, oysters in the Manatee River with oyster river ecology, and they finished on the schedules. They deployed 10,000 oyster rag pots. And, we can't confirm that the ones that we put out recently are already starting to grow baby oysters, so that's really exciting. I know that they're launching into their environmental restoration fund project now too, and I think she was working on, I give a day for the Bay event down there in December. Yeah, it'll going out specifically on time, so, but it's a nice paddle. I think it's a river, but yeah, even the grapples that we put out like a year ago have now all started to coalesce. And it's pretty cool to see that. It's cool. It's kind of like new approach and how it looks like. Nice. We're gonna dance and beach the river.
All past, all of these.
Steve.